Welcome to the Mercury Center Stage podcast, where we get to know the individuals on stage and those behind the scenes. Thanks so much for joining us. I am Brian Ritter, the Executive Director for the Mercury Chamber Orchestra. And today I'm pleased to welcome Mercury's principal double bass, Deborah Dunham. Great to have you on the podcast, Deborah.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me join you today.
Yeah, you know, we just began Mercury's 20th season, and I was trying to think about this. How many of those seasons have you played with the group?
I think at least 16, maybe 17.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It was such a long time ago. It seems like I've always been playing with Mercury.
Well, now you grew up in the Pacific Northwest. Where specifically was that? And tell us a little bit about what that was like.
My family grew up north of Seattle. And we were basically in the area of a small town called Mukilteo. Yeah. And that's where you catch the ferry to go over to Whidbey Island. So a lot of waterfront, very hilly. You could have a house and have a great view and not have to spend $1 million for it. And it was quite a magical childhood, I think. We also had 2 mountain ranges. You know, the Cascades and the Olympics. And what was funny to me was years later, I realized because of all these amazing landmarks, the bay was to the west and the Olympics were across, but the Cascades were to the east. And then you were oriented. And when I moved away to flat places, Texas is very flat, for instance, my sense of direction was shot. So I had to learn that much later in life. But it was a very great pace of life. I was the first of 6 children and very musical family. My father's people came from Hungary and we were always singing in the house. And my grandmother had been training to be a concert pianist. And so it was in the genes, it was in the gene pool. And what was kind of fun was you're growing up with a house full of people, one of the rules was no singing at the table at dinner. So it permeated our life on all levels.
So did you know early on that you wanted to make music a big part of your life? What was that earliest feeling like, boy, I really want to study this for real?
Well, I started piano lessons, I think 2nd grade or something, because of my grandmother's influence, of course. And when I got to junior high, they had these things called orchestras. And so I thought, oh, I'd love to play the harp. Oh, wow. And I went and talked to my mom and she says, oh, honey, she said, I can't see you dragging that instrument around in the rain. And in those days, it rained a lot in Seattle area. And so I happened to be very tall by the time I was in the 5th, 6th grade. And the string teacher went to all the little schools. And he looked at me and he was this little Italian man. And he said, I think you'd be perfect on bass.
It's almost as big as the harp.
So when I brought it home, my mother was horrified, but it wasn't going to be as hard to move around in the rain. And so I told him, I said, well, I'll try it out. I said, I'd rather play the cello on. He said, oh, I have too many cellists already. He said, but I think you'll be perfect for that. So I tried it out. I was a good sport. And within 6 months, everybody within a 60-mile radius wanted me to play in their group. So, you know, when you're a teenager and you're wanted, that is golden. You know, you have a purpose in life there already. So I think when I got into high school, I was playing with 2 youth orchestras, Seattle Youth Symphony and Everett Youth Symphony.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I was also playing with two community orchestras, Everett Symphony, and there was one at Seattle University that had me come up. And also there was a string ensemble that met every Saturday. So that's 5 rehearsals a week. So it was a no-brainer, right?
Well, it sounds like there was some great music, great musical joy in your household. And, you know, to have a grandmother pursuing a professional career as a pianist, I imagine lots of inspiration there. Was there other influences beyond those family ones?
Well, you know, early on when you're studying, you get to meet some wonderful musicians. I think I was 12 and I was in attendance of a master class. Charlie Brennan was the cellist of the Philadelphia Quartet, and they were in residence at the University of Washington. And he came up north to our little town and did this master class on cello. And I happened to be there and I was taking everything in, and he said, "Are there any questions? I think there's one more question." And I stood up and I said, "Can you tell me how to vibrato?" And everybody laughed hysterically except Charlie, and he got this big smile on his face. And he said, "You know, we make such a big deal out of vibrato." And so he played the swan for me with his arm. He was just showing that that's all it really takes. And so everybody thought that was great, actually. And so when I went home and started practicing, I took that to heart. And the next lesson, my teacher said, "Where the hell did you get that?" So that's all it took, you know. But there was always someone around to inspire you, and also your peers. There might be someone who is working really hard on excerpts, and it's like, "What's an excerpt?" You know. And then you go, "Oh, okay." And if one thing just builds on another, it was just, you know, it's like anything in life. It's a trade, or it's you know, a hobby, but not a hobby. And the great saying was, you never work your instrument, you play your instrument. So when you grow up and you have the luxury of a career in something like that, people say, "What's your hobby?" "Well, sight reading. Let's go sight read some quartets."
So from your high school years, did you decide to go on to music conservatory, or did you pursue other studies?
So I ended up taking a side trip over into military service, and it was in communications, and learned a great deal, and was over in Southeast Asia. And the skills as a musician were very, very valuable for what I did. So once I got out of there, I picked up where I left off, but I could pay with the GI Bill, whatever I wanted to do. And I had obviously come home to Seattle, and so I started looking at just my own backyard. And so I went to the Cornish Institute in Seattle, and at the time, traditionally it's been very centered around contemporary music. And, you know, for instance, Dear John Cage got there. I think Harry Partch had a big influence. A lot of the composers of the time, Pauline Oliveras, I remember doing a project with her. They also had the foresight to look at some of the ethnomusicology instruments that you really should always have around. And I learned how to play in a gamelan ensemble. And also, what I was not expecting was that they had to have you do a minor in another art. And so I learned how to draw. And to me, that was a great balancer, because music is so intangible. It's such an intangible art. But if you can do something in the visual arts, at least you can hold the paper and look at it. Whenever I was struggling with something, I would look over on the wall at something I had drawn, and somehow it was very settling. And I could go back to the page and just start over again and know that I was making progress, even though you couldn't see it. It really inspired me to want to go into contemporary music. And I ended up with a big fellowship down at the California Institute of the Arts in Los Angeles. And, you know, I talk about influence. Xenakis came through and was coaching things. Blew my mind. And of course, Mort Sabotnik was down there. I'd never really gotten into electronic music before. And you know, just the passion that people have for their little corner of what they're doing, they're composing, they're exploring is really contagious, you know. And what was funny then was, after this training in contemporary music, focus on contemporary music, when I came back out into the real world, when I started taking auditions with those excerpts, because of the detail work you have to do in contemporary music, man, it was like, oh, I never saw that before, or this before, or there's a, it just opened up everything. It was great, great training. And I met my husband in LA, and we ended up, he ended up in the Cleveland Quartet. And so we moved to Rochester, New York, and he was there at the Eastman School. And I managed to get into the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra. I was a tenured player there. And then when the quartet disbanded, we moved down to Boston, where James became the chair of the string department there. And Boston is wild. There's so much music there. You play something every week. It was incredible. And so at one point, I got onto the sub list with the Boston Symphony and played with them quite frequently for 5 years. And there was chamber music and there was contemporary music, and then there was early music. And somebody said, they'd heard me play Bach and they thought I knew what I was doing with early music. And so I started playing in some of those ensembles, just as an extra. And I thought, I better start really getting some coaching and reading some of the treatises so that I'm really in this realm. And, it just took off. Then, there was much more going on. And I realized, oh my gosh, early music is like playing contemporary music through a wormhole, a virtual wormhole, because you are handed instruments that the composer probably had in his studio or in his aural conception, and this would have probably been close to the sound, and you're using gut strings and these funny bows, and it was extraordinary. And then again, when you go back out to the modern orchestra playing, you have such a huge perspective again on how to play through things, and all of a sudden Strauss wasn't hard anymore. And neither was Bach. I mean, it's challenging, but you don't contort yourself to play through every single note. Now you know how to voice the notes, how to move through the notes, how to contribute to the ensemble. So it was fabulous. It just really enhanced what I was already doing. How can you enhance what you already have? But every 5 years you turn around and say, wow, that really improved things, and that really improved things. So it's constantly going on, and you can tell I could just talk about this all day.
Well, what a great bit of luck, because Boston is such a fascinating place in that it has such an incredible early music tradition, so many renowned ensembles there, as well as a very renowned new music tradition, contemporary music tradition, with so many ensembles and composers residing there, and going back, almost a century, really, what the Boston Symphony was doing in terms of commissioning and all of that, and a vast between space as well of musical opportunity. So what an incredible experience that must have been.
Oh, it was. And it's amazing to be thrown into some other city. It's like, how are we going to get along here? And it's like, you just open your door and walk out. And make sure you practice your scales. But yeah, it's wonderful. And to Kusevitsky's credit, he, they would commission all these works, and he would have them played more than once in a season, just so that people had a better chance to digest this new piece.
Yeah, Kusevitsky being the renowned music director of the Boston Symphony a number of years ago. But yeah, his relationship with Copland and Stravinsky and Prokofiev, Poulenc, just so many great pieces that I was always surprised were actually commissioned and premiered by the Boston Symphony. A real legacy for sure. So what brought you then to Houston?
My man, who was hired by Rice University Shepherd School of Music. And
James Dunham, of course, a violist and on the faculty at the Shepherd School.
Yes, yeah. And beautiful move for him. He really deserved that. He's just such a great and devoted musician and teacher, and he really cares for his students, and they're handing them off to their careers. And so it was a bit of an adjustment for me coming from Boston, but I soon realized with great amusement that Boston is kind of a miniature city with a big city attitude. And here in Houston, Boston proper could probably fit in the inner loop.
That's right.
and so Houston's quite the opposite. It feels like a town to me, and yet it's so enormous. And I realized, it wasn't going to be a problem adjusting to Houston.
Well, we have certainly been the beneficiary of both of your talents. James has played with Mercury on occasion, but as you said at the beginning, for about 17 seasons now, you've been a central part of the Mercury Orchestra, and we are so fortunate for that. I'm curious if during that time there have been any moments that stand out in your mind as being very special, playing on stage or whatever it might be.
This reminds me of a question people will ask often, which is, who's your favorite composer? And I have heard myself say, well, whoever it is on the music stand this week. And I have to say, every time, I think partly because of the creativity that's coming from the podium, every concert series is different from the last one. And I always feel like, oh, this is the best one, or we'll do something radical at the Miller Theater. Remember the one with the fireworks coming up from the front of the stage? It's like, oh, this is the best one. Or even just concerts, the neighborhood concerts where our colleagues are playing solos. It's like, wow, I haven't heard that person play that well before. It's just, it's just getting better every year. So I don't want to put my finger on one particular concert because Berkeley keeps delivering, I think. Yeah. So I feel grateful that I have been in basically from the beginning. And it might be 18 years. I don't remember a lot of luck in the archives. But, just to watch the group emerge, yeah, and the direction that it's been taking. It's not been stodgy by any means. And I have loved, on occasion, I will take a concert off. Thank you. On occasion, I'll do that and do another project. But it's so great to come to that concert that I'm not playing and sit in the audience and hear what they're having to say. I remember one concert, the person next to me didn't know who Brahms was, I think. I said, who is this Brahms person? And it was so refreshing. And someone else in front says, oh, this is so-and-so. And just to listen to the interaction in the audience, it was really, really extraordinary. And another thing I love is that a lot of the audience not only has a subscription to the Symphony, but they also have one to Mercury because of the overlap in the repertoire. Yes. So they'll hear the different kinds of sound coming out of the woodwinds as compared to the Symphony, and they're just mesmerized. And just the timings that are a little bit different, or the way you end a phrase is just a little bit different. And so they love to hear both of them. They love to compare them, not one over the other, but isn't that cool? That's what Beethoven was hearing, but this is what we are now. And it's, steel strings and full speed ahead, and it's easier. And
yeah. I think you've touched on something so special, because I could not agree more. And our audiences, the folks that we attract to our concerts, there are very seasoned concert goers, but there are folks that are attending for the very first time, not just Mercury for the first time, but a classical music ensemble for the first time. And I often want to remind those around us that somebody coming to hear Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, that could very well be a world premiere for that individual.
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right.
or as you said, the Brahms symphonies that we've been going through, and some of the other projects involving some of his music, um, Mozart or Handel, whatever it might be. It for many in the audience, a good percentage actually of those in the audience, that piece is a world premiere for them, and so it's. Yeah, I think it brings such a special energy to the mix. For others, they may have heard that particular symphony or that particular piece a dozen times, but for others, it's for the very first time. And how exciting it is to share. And I think it's also one of those things that all of us can't wait to get back to once we get out of this pandemic crisis. But
Yeah, it's tough on the screen, isn't it?
yeah,
It's tough.
it is. It is. You lose that very, very special dynamic that live experience brings.
You know, it's kind of like watching the comedians, the nighttime comedians on TV, how things kind of just fall flat. They don't have that feedback. I don't think audiences understand how important they are to a performance, to a live performance, and how we actually, as musicians, can bounce off of that. It fuels what's going on stage. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it?
It is an amazing dynamic that is all a part of it. Not just the applause, but just that energy in the room brings so much to everybody.
It does.
So now it's time for a segment we're calling Favorite Five.
Okay.
Here we go. What is your favorite book?
My favorite. Oh, there it is. There's that question again. It's the one on my rack, right? Oh, you know, one of my favorite books is from childhood, and we had this ritual of reading it every year. It's a very charming book. It takes place, I think, at the turn of the last century in America. I'm looking it up. Oh yeah, Ray Bradbury. It's by Ray Bradbury. So, you know, you think of Ray Bradbury as a science fiction writer, but he was it's just the way he captures the characters in the book. And one of my favorite characters is this aging gentleman who was probably losing his short-term memory, and the kids, like the group of kids, would run around town, you know, and they like to go talk to the time machine. And there was some inventor who was inventing a happy machine. He wanted people to be happy again, you know, and so it was kind of a tribute to the summer. So there was a big chapter at the beginning of, you knew it was the beginning of summer because, and then there was the end of summer. And so it's very poignant, very quick read basically, but it's just gorgeous writing. So it's one of my favorite books.
So let me ask you what your favorite beverage is.
Favorite beverage? Oh, right now, my favorite beverage is Topo Chico with lemon.
It's very refreshing. That sounds fantastic.
Great bubbles in Topo Chico.
What is your favorite movie of all time or your favorite TV series?
Again, it's funny. It's science fiction, and I don't know why, but Blade Runner, I think, was one of my first favorite movies. So gonna put that one out there. It's a grimy movie, but there's something that makes you think.
Hey, what is your favorite travel destination?
Oh, you know, I love driving. And I have been around the world quite a bit. I lived in Europe for a while. I loved going to the Alps, for instance. But I have to tell you, Brian, I became a real American the day I realized I had all 50 states that I had driven in all 50 states.
Yeah.
Because of the bass, when you have music festivals, it's much more fun to travel in the car. I really do love driving. And one year I had to go from Jackson Hole, Wyoming to Chicago, Illinois for another festival. And so I was looking at my route and I realized North Dakota was the only one missing. So I took the northern route. And I have a complete set.
You got it.
So my favorite destination is America. How's that?
We'll give you that. So much to see. So much to see. It's incredible.
It is. Every state's different. Every region's different. It's extraordinary, really.
Well, our last one is, what is your favorite classical music recording?
Oh gosh, I remember how moved I was by the Berg violin concerto. I remember when I was much younger, I had never heard anything like it, and I loved it. I don't remember who the violinist was, who the orchestra was, but I remember Berg. And somebody told me it was 12 tone. I said, no, it's not 12 tone. So that may have been where I got hooked into the contemporary music. I don't know.
Well, such an incredible piece, you know, and he quotes a Bach cantata in it, I believe, and it's has this very angelic story behind it, and it's just a stunning piece. I agree.
Exactly. So that's the weaving of the time travel, you know, and how we transcend in each era, but we include, so every era contributes into the next. It's amazing. It's like music is music.
Well, there we go. There's our favorite 5. That was fun. Thanks, Deborah, for sharing your recommendations. Really terrific stuff. So as we conclude our conversation, I did want to ask you to talk a little bit about what music has meant to you during this very unusual, this very crazy time we're all living through, and what that has been like for you as a musician and a great lover of this art form.
The first thing that happened when they shut us down was watching the work evaporate. Just the practicality of that impact. And, the first thing you think about is the well-being of your colleagues. And at the same time, because I teach up at Sam Houston State, we had to go into an emergency pivot so we could finish out the semester and be able to give our students credit. And so we went online immediately and had to get very creative very quickly. And when the juries came up, the students really went beyond expectation. And so it made me realize we cannot stop playing. And now we have the next semester coming up in fall, and we don't know if we're even going to be there on campus yet in the fall, but I'm in the middle of a certification course to teach Blackboard format on online. So I'm making my curriculum so that it's working from anywhere. And of course, there's a lot of interaction involved with that. That kind of, it has to be because of what you're teaching. But you cannot stop playing. You cannot just sit and say, oh, woe is me. First of all, I think musicians they're in the habit of playing and not necessarily performing, but you're practicing. And when you miss a couple of days of practicing, you get kind of ugly. You get kind of crabby, I should say. So it was really funny to say, you know what, I haven't practiced in a couple of days. And so you take it out and the instrument out and you feel immediately better. I think we are vibrationalists first.
Yes.
It's vibration. The keener your sense of vibration, the better you're going to play in tune. And so I do think that you've got to keep your hands on there. What was really profound to me was to be able, in this schedule, I guess you would call it, I found myself, I just want to say, I set up a routine in the morning so that every day I got certain specific things done, and then I was fine. So I haven't had any depression like some people do. And I think it's because I've established a morning routine.
Yeah.
When I stick with that, I'm okay. And one of the things is just to sit in silence and watch the sun come up or watch the light change. And I am impressed with whatever piece of music comes in. This morning, it was the Barber violin concerto. And the other day, it was a Bach partita, and it's like, where did that come from? It floats up from nowhere. Or, one day it was something out of the Valkyrie. It's like, so it is part of the weave of who we are. And I think my husband and I are going to do a small recital in September online for St. Cecilia. And so we're looking at what we can do for that, but we're still looking ahead. And it may be quite a while before large ensembles are back on stage again with a full house of audience. But in the meantime, it's alive. It's still alive.
Yeah, it so much is. And indeed, we can't wait to see you in person and back on stage performing. I just want to thank you so much for all of your artistry, all of the wonderful years so far with Mercury, and we're very excited about the years ahead. And I really appreciate our conversation this morning. Thank you, Deborah.
It's always great to talk to you, Brian.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mercury Center Stage podcast. We'll be back soon. Until then, keep listening to great music.